Good day with your major newscast. I am Jessica Daw. First with the highlights. The United States wants Guyana's tendering process to be reformed. The chairman of the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative is warning against often selecting the lowest bidder. And in the region, there are mixed reactions among some teachers in Barbados to the reopening of schools next Monday. And Antigua and Barbuda's government says the granting of amnesty to foreigners who have overstayed is not a political gimmick. And you'll also have your latest international news coming from the BBC.
Advertise with us on News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM for best coverage on programs on motivation, beauty and health, parenting and relationships, knowing your rights, and a variety of enlightening content, and get value for your money. Call our helpful staff today on 223-1056 or 223-1041 today.
Now for the news in detail. The United States Ambassador to Guyana, Sarah Ann Lynch, on Wednesday cited the need for reforms in several areas, including the tendering system. She made the remarks while participating in a panel discussion on opportunities for cooperation in energy, technology, education, and services that was part of the International Energy Conference Guyana.
There's still certainly a lot of work to do to make this a great investment climate, and I think the government should really focus on the tender process and modernizing that, look at tax incentives, looking at a single window. I know there's been some talk about that, so making it easier to navigate the business climate here and setting up a business. So those are just some of my thoughts on making it more friendly.
Currently, the National Procurement and Tender Administration Board is stacked with mostly government supporters and known political activists. The chairman of the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, OGCI, Bob Dudley, is warning against often selecting the lowest bidder. The OGCI is made up of 12 of the world's largest oil and gas producers that account for 30% of the world's population. He told the International Energy Conference Guyana that oftentimes the quality of work is poor and the project works out more expensive.
Sometimes procurement processes have unintended consequences. Mandating transparency and tendering, which you spoke about, is a really good thing. But when always selecting the low-cost bidders is the objective, you often don't get where you want to be. You don't get the needed quality. And I have seen it when government officials are investigated for not selecting the lowest bidder. Then fear sets in. From then on, you always get the lowest bidder, and you get poor quality most of the time. The good bidders stop participating. I don't think that's going to happen here.
Mr. Dudley also cautions against taking on the influx of consultants.
In a growth province like Guyana, you will be besieged by consultants. Some have good suggestions. Some proposals will send confusion while you evaluate multiple options and then delay the path forward. And it has slowed down many projects around the world. The good thing in Guyana, again, is I don't sense these things here, and the commitment to growth and moving fast.
Chairman of the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, Bob Dudley. Vice President Barbados says Guyana will not be pursuing an international agenda that in the end leaves developing nations like his worse off.
We're not going to get caught up with international prescriptive goals about sustainability because we've seen so many of those come and go. The Millennium Development Goals, reaching some net zero. And often I say prescriptive because although the goals are set in an international environment, often without the developing world at the table, Policies and the financial support to achieve those goals are often lacking. In fact, global policies lead to us not achieving some of the goals or work counter to achieving the goals.
He suggests that the international agenda is double-edged, citing the role of the World Trade Organization, WTO, in destroying the Caribbean banana and the sugar industries.
The Millennium Development Goals were set, and then simultaneously at the WTO, the developed world started pushing for full reciprocity. There was a move to full reciprocity, pushing the world to full reciprocity. That led to the destruction of many sectors. The banana industry in the Caribbean, because it was enjoying some preferences from the European Union, got practically wiped out. The sugar sector here in Guyana saw a loss of about $40 million in one single move in terms of markets. So often the international goals are not aligned with policies practiced at a global level.
Vice President Bara Jagdeo says no small countries like Guyana that had never historically contributed to large amounts of greenhouses and climate change are being asked to share the burden of global pollution. A joint venture between 3T NRMEC and Orange Development Incorporated Training Center is developing what is said to be Guyana's first training facility for the local workforce to support the country's offshore oil and gas sector. The NRMEC Guyana Training Center of Excellence combines in-classroom training, software and technology, and immersive stimulators for high-hazard activity learning. It should become the first regional engineering construction industry training board, internationally accredited training provider in Guyana. In addition, it will offer what is claimed to be the country's first OPITO-approved basic offshore safety induction and emergency training certificate, along with a controlled environment for scenario-based firefighting emergency response training. Orange is also constructing the country's first commercial heliport as part of a wider complex incorporating the new training facility, an aviation or marine polytechnic school, and a hotel business center. Now for the news in the region. Some teachers in Barbados are not comfortable returning to school on February 21 for face-to-face learning. We get more from Emmanuel Joseph from Barbados today.
Chief Education Officer Dr. Ramona Archer Bradshaw explained how that flexibility would work as she declared that the Ministry of Education values teachers and principals. Archer Bradshaw said the ministry will accommodate those teachers who do not feel comfortable returning to the classrooms on February the 21st.
We have taken into account what is being said by our unions, and we are flexible enough at this point to allow those teachers the time, that is about 1 week, to settle themselves, to return at a later date.
But newly elected president of the Barbados Union of Teachers, Rudy Lovell, expressed reservations about having some teachers start in-person teaching on February the 21st and others the following week.
Because essentially, one can say it's being delayed with the option being given to some teachers who are not comfortable to return. But on the other hand, you cannot have teachers given an option to return when they feel comfortable and still expect the schools to function efficiently.
However, President of the Barbados Secondary Teachers Union, Mary Redmond, embraced the phased return to the physical classroom and the flexible arrangements for its members who have been pushing for a delay to the recommencement of the face-to-face classes due to the spike in COVID-19 cases, particularly among those of school age.
The BSTU is satisfied with the provision of the phased return and the flexibility, phased return to face-to-face instruction and the flexibility it allows. Ignore my dog in the background. For the timing of the return to school by its members and the phased nature of the return of students.
Emmanuel Joseph for Barbados Today.
Republic Bank Limited has terminated its contentious return to work COVID-19 policy for unvaccinated workers, and it has asked the Workers' Union, the Banking, Insurance and the General Workers Union, BIGWU, to withdraw related court matters. A letter dated February 14 from the bank's Senior Manager Group and Employee Industrial Relations Department to BIGWU's Vice President Jason Brown pointed to the bank's decision to terminate the mandatory PCR tests for unvaccinated staff to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, which was implemented on September 6. The policy was terminated officially last week. The Express yesterday reached out to the bank's managing director, Nigel Baptiste, via WhatsApp, who confirmed the contents of the letters sent to the union are accurate. According to the court matters, BIGWU has filed against the bank over the now-defunct policy. The Senior Manager Group and Employee Industrial Relations Department of the bank called on the union to reconsider its decision and remove the matters from the court at this time. The letter further suggested that parties engage with a view to amicably resolving the two residual issues, namely the union's request to have warning notices rescinded and removed from the personnel files of those, along with the reimbursement of the funds expended by staff who would have paid for PCR tests over the life of the policy. In his response to the letter, BIGWU's Vice President Brown stated it's unfortunate such sentiments would not have prevailed prior to the effecting of the policy, which translated into emotional and financial hardship for so many. Brown said about 250 employees remain unvaccinated. However, he said the union is always willing to engage in meaningful consultation and will therefore seek accommodation at its next scheduled negotiations meeting tomorrow to begin some preliminary discussion. In Trinidad, relatives of a national detained at the Chagaramas heliport are demanding answers. Andre Daniel was one of 3 nationals aboard the pirogue where a Venezuelan baby was tragically killed last Sunday. Daniel's family wants authorities to either release him or lay charges. CNC 3's Ottorington tells us why in this report.
When 39 people boarded a vessel from Tocopita on Saturday, the 5th of February, there were 3 TNT nationals among the group of Venezuelans. It has been over 8 days since they have been held at the Chaguaramas heliport. Now the relatives of these nationals want to know their fate. Since the incident, 35 Venezuelan migrants have been repatriated to Venezuela. Speaking to CNC3 News, the mother of 32-year-old Andre Daniel, one of the TNT nationals, says she has only been able to communicate with her son via his lawyer. Marcia Williams says there has been numerous attempts to get answers from the authorities, but without success.
If he's not being charged, why he cannot be released? For whatever purpose. If they have nothing on him, if for being detained is over 48 hours and it's crossed 48 hours, so we can change. And yes, sir, no, nothing is being transpired. Why is he still there? Why do they still have him?
Daniel, who is from Mova, was part of the crew on the vessel and is currently held along with the captain and another sailor on the pirogue that was illegally entering Trinidad and Tobago. His mother says he's a construction worker and admits that she's not aware of his activities on the sea. She says her son has an 8-week-old baby and they are worried.
I'm not comfortable at all because I don't know if he is healthy, if he is eating, what's taking place. So I am not too sure as to what is happening with him right now. I'm not getting no answers.
The incident has brought Trinidad and Tobago into the international limelight after the Coast Guard opened fire on the vessel, killing a baby and injuring his mother. Daniel is being represented by attorney Kyle Cox, and CNC3 understands he has only been interviewed by police officers about the shooting. His mother says she attempted to see her son at the Chagrams heliport, but was barred.
When I found out that he was there, when I went, they tell me he's there, but I can't see him.
And the reason for that?
They have no reason. They just say I can't see him. I can't see him. I can't talk to him. Nothing. So I don't know.
Investigations are continuing into the matter. Ottorington, CNC3 News.
And lastly, in the region, Antigua and Barbuda's Immigration and Foreign Affairs Minister Chet Green is hitting back at critics who deem the upcoming amnesty for immigrants to be a political ploy by his government. Green, during his budget speech presentation on Tuesday, spoke to the importance of granting amnesty to those who have been in the country for years and have been continuously contributing to its growth. Antigua Observer reports that he mentioned that far too many times families have been shortchanged due to gaps in the system. Green went on to say that with the increasing need for a larger labor force due to a rise in developmental projects, it is a no-brainer to help migrants who abide by the laws of the land. Applicants who have resided in the country for a continuous period of 4 years, but who have not yet completed 7 years, will be granted residency, while persons who have gone over that 7-year mark will be cleared to citizenship. The Gaston Brown-led administration, on several occasions, has offered amnesty to immigrants who have overstayed their prescribed time, and in 2021, the Prime Minister hinted that they would be offering an amnesty again in the new year. That news was corroborated in a cabinet a few weeks ago, with the government saying that they would even waive fees to regularize the status of indigent illegal immigrants. In considering whether an application for amnesty should be granted, the cabinet would look at whether the applicant has any criminal convictions, his family or her family ties in the country where applicable, and in any other information it deems relevant to the application. The amnesty period will run from March 1 to April 30. And here now is your international news coming from the BBC.
This is the BBC News with Fiona MacDonald. The Secretary-General of NATO says the alliance is concerned that Russia may be trying to engineer a pretext for an invasion of Ukraine. Jens Stoltenberg was speaking after reports of shelling between the Ukrainian army and Russian-backed separatists in the Donbass region. The Ukrainian military said pro-Russian forces had shelled a village, hitting a kindergarten and injuring 3 workers. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky called it a big provocation. The Kremlin said reports of an escalation in Donbass were of deep concern. The US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said NATO had proof Russia was still increasing its forces on Ukraine's border.
We see them add to the more than 150,000 troops that they already have arrayed along that border. We see some of those troops inch closer to that border. We see them fly in more combat and support aircraft. We see them sharpen their readiness in the Black Sea. We even see them stocking up their blood supplies. I know firsthand that you don't do these sort of things for no reason. And you certainly don't do them if you're getting ready to pack up and go home.
France and its allies say they're going to withdraw their military forces from Mali, where they've been fighting a jihadi insurgency for nearly a decade. A joint statement said obstructions from Mali's military government had made it impossible to continue. President Emmanuel Macron denied that the French-led campaign in Mali had been a failure. Standing with him, the Senegalese President Macky Sall said he understood the decision, but he stressed that terrorism in the Sahel was not just an African problem.
Most of all, we have agreed with Europe that the fight against terrorism in the Sahel is not only an African matter. Here, we are agreed that there is renewed commitment to stay in the region and redistribute resources.
The Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte has apologised to the Indonesian people for the Dutch military's systematic and widespread use of torture and extreme violence against those fighting for independence in the 1940s. Mr Rutte said his government accepted the conclusions of an historical review. Anna Holligan is in The Hague.
This report acknowledges not just the scale of the brutality, but also critically that it seemed to be part of a deliberate military strategy. The Cabinet had recognised there were excesses in the past during the independence struggle, but it was thought those were the exception instead of this kind of deliberate strategic policy that could arguably be considered to have been a war crime. Burning down villages, extrajudicial killings, torture during interrogations, executions of prisoners and civilians. The report has said the Dutch were the occupiers, so it's them who should be held accountable.
BBC News. At least 104 people are now known to have died in the floods and landslides that struck the Brazilian city of Petrópolis on Tuesday. Rescuers are still digging for survivors in houses that were buried or destroyed. The governor of Rio de Janeiro state described the situation as almost like a war. An attempt to persuade a rebel militia in eastern Congo to lay down its arms has ended with 3 peace envoys, all former warlords, being taken hostage. The 3 men had been sent to negotiate with Codeco militiamen who have been accused of multiple atrocities in recent months. A Russian research scientist accused of spying for Moscow while working in Germany has pleaded not guilty at the start of his trial. German prosecutors say Ilnur Nagaev shared information about Europe's Ariane space rocket programme in exchange for almost $3,000. Mr. Nagaev told the court he'd never heard of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service and would have refused to work for a secret organisation. Kamila Valieva, the teenage Russian skater who earlier failed a dope test, has not won a medal in the individual women's figure skating at the Winter Olympics. Valieva was beaten into 4th place behind 2 other Russians and a Japanese after numerous errors in her free skate routine. She'd been expected to win gold. Robin Cousins, the former British champion, thinks she should not have been allowed to compete today.
She had coped admirably. And I said to you after the short programme, when that release came, that maybe that's what she needed. She would be able to come out and skate, and it's obviously not the case. And someone thought having her do that was better than allowing her to go home.
To her parents.
To her family, and to wait and sort this out.
That was the former British champion Robin Cousins. BBC News.
And that there was your international news coming from the BBC. Here now is a recap of the highlights. The United States wants Guyana's tendering process to be reformed. The chairman of the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative is warning against often selecting the lowest bidder. And in the region, there are mixed reactions among some teachers in Barbados to the reopening of schools next Monday. And Antigua and Barbuda's government says the granting of amnesty to foreigners who have overstayed is not a political gimmick. And you had your latest international news coming from the BBC. And that's your major newscast. I am Jessica Daw.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.